It's always a joy to be here. I try not to have favorite churches, but you guys mess me up. It's such a joy to see God carrying out his work in different parts of the country. I met Pastor Brent, and he was just a young guy, just getting started, and you can just kind of tell God's got his hand on some people, and I'm not at all surprised at how things have continued to grow. And it's just an honor. It's a joy for me to come each time and see the progress you're making, and just feel God will maybe use me as a little part to help you along the way. I remember it just seemed like a couple blinks of the eyes ago, I was the kid preacher, and have the old guys come in and try to teach some of this kind of stuff. And I looked in the mirror and I thought it was my dad, and it wasn't. It was me. And now I'm the old guy. Couple amens out there, old guys. My dad said, growing old ain't for sissies, amen? So I want to take you to Ephesians 6, kind of a text about parenting. Ephesians 6, one of the most important passages about parenting, I think. And, I'm a type A personality. I'm highly motivated. I got plans. I'm always going about 120 miles per hour, and I get up early in the morning and I got stuff on my heart. I want to get her done. And, I want to be successful in ministry. I want to be successful in my hobbies, gardening and homesteading, but I must be successful at being a husband, being a dad, and being a papa. We use the word papa. It's all kinds of things. We have all different names for grandparents in New York, a lot of ethnic. We have Oma and Opa in German, and in our church, and we have Nana and Nano, Italian grandparents, and I'm just Papa. Ephesians 6, as we look at this children, the one we just smashed down the children's throats in Sunday school and camp. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. God's going to speak to the parents there as well. God has called us to be parents and not to be peers, and not necessarily to be friends. I think of a thing I saw years ago. If any man seek after greatness, let him forget greatness, and seek after truth, and he shall find both. I think there's almost a parenting version of that. If any man seek for his children to be his friend, forget friendship and be a parent, and in the end you'll find both. So that should be our goal. But I see a lot of times people sacrificing the permanent on the altar of the temporary, just want to be their children's best friends. And God's called us to be parents. There's certain things in life, there's laws that govern the universe. We talked about it yesterday, authority. And they need to see that modeled in their parents' relationship, whether it's a biological parents or blended family. They still need to see that structure. They need to see that chain of command. They need to see that trickle down authority from God. And my daughter Leah was so funny. She was about 5-6 years old, and she would always, my firstborn, you'll get to hear her testimony. Second hour, she spoke at our 40th anniversary celebration. It's about 12 minutes, and it'll bless your heart. But we'd go to a church. I'd be preaching somewhere, and she'd go with me. We'd go to a camp. We'd go to a grocery store or a restaurant, and she would ask, Dad, who's the big boss here? That's a weird question for a 5 or 6 year old to ask. And she asked it all the time. One day I was just like, Leah, why do you always ask that question? And she said, she looked at me like I was the biggest dummy in town. She said, duh. You find out who's the big boss, and you're really nice to him, then you get what you want. She had learned submission and appeal. And she kind of might have had her daddy wrapped around her little finger. It really, really works. And some people figure it out really young. Now, her younger sister didn't learn it so fast. We're going to talk about her in second session. How many of you have a strong-willed child or strong-willed grandchild? Raise your hand. Okay, we're going to we'll suffer together second hour on that topic, okay? but some basic principles about parenting that have really meant the world. And I do feel my kids love God. They're faithful. They've never wavered in their faith. They've never been backslidden. They've always fully engaged in church their whole lives. They married wonderful people. They're wonderful parents themselves. And so I feel Jesus did it in spite of me. So what a joy it is to watch him do it. There are laws that govern the universe, the physical universe, the laws of entropy and energy decay and first laws, thermodynamics. But there are also spiritual laws. Give, and be given unto you. Humble yourself, that you might be exalted. These are just laws that govern the universe. And people who learn the laws early, and that's our job as a parent, to teach this. But we teach most powerfully what we model. So a lot of times, we have to keep modeling it no matter whether they're getting it or not. Leah picks this up at age 5 and 6, and her older sister didn't really pick it up until she's about 14, 15. And we had some issues in that journey. But I want us to focus. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and thy mother. The first commandment with promise. God promised a special blessing. So we need to honor our parents to the time of their death and be responsible for them. Verse 3, but that's a whole other topic. When the parent becomes the child becomes the parent. We don't have time for that tonight. That it may be well with thee, now mayest live long upon the earth. God gives a special promise for that. But then it kind of balances this thing out. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Just kind of having to read that child, and every child is different. Isn't just, I got it right with the first one, which we sort of did, but she was easy. My firstborn was like, Cosby did a thing years ago. His firstborn, his name was Eric. She comes out, good morning. Who's the handsome man here? I'm your father. What time do you get up in the morning? About 7:30. Oh, I get up at 4, and here's the way I cry. Wah! Wah! And he said, and so I have a child like that. They're just different. And you can't treat them all exactly the same way. My firstborn and thirdborn were really easy. Tell them not to do something. I think I paddled Leah maybe twice. My son maybe once. I can't even really remember. But just the thought of it was like all it took. My secondborn, we'll talk about that second session. But I want you to think for a moment, how did God deal with his children? The children of Israel, the children of the Lord. They come out of Egyptian slavery. And this is so amazing. It's so simple. It's in our face. But most people wouldn't get parenting skills from Exodus chapter 18, 19, 20. First of all, God got them out of Egypt. Boy, how would that apply? Well, my kids have never been in Egypt. Yeah, they live in Egypt. The world, Egypt represents the world. And you just got to get your kids out of this world as much as you can. We're in the world, but we're not of the world. And there's just certain television programs that just your kids don't need to see. There's just certain movies they don't need to see. There's certain literature they don't need to see. You got to get them out of the world. There's certain music they don't need to hear. And if you don't get started when they're right away, I've had people get saved and their children were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and they try to bring these rules into their children's lives and change it. And boy, it didn't work out so well. So if you're bringing them up, if you're midstream with that, pray for one another and don't hold your breath if the die has already been cast. But as soon as possible, keep them as much out of the world as you can. Don't let the world indoctrinate them. My kids went to Christian school for a while, and then they wound up going to public school, and they did very well. But I sat down and taught my kids creation science. I taught my kids biblical morality. I had them prepared when things came up in school, that they were ready to give answer of the hope that lies within them. And they boggled the science teachers' minds in our public school. So you got to really work your way through that. But number one, God got his people out of Israel. That's a very important thing. Have some kind of standards. You don't just let them choose their own friends, because they're not going to choose the right friends. You've got to do due diligence to keep them out of the world as much as you can. And that's the negative side. That creates a vacuum. So that's where the local New Testament church comes in. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And that starts like age 2 or 3. My kids just grew up in church. My kids were on somebody's hip at every church function. The high school girls would fight, and junior high girls would fight over my little babies, and they carried my kids all over the place. And so the kids just grew up in church. If their friends are in church, they're going to want to come. Well, I go to the church a half hour, 45 minutes early. My kids wanted to come to church early with dad. Mom comes on time, never late, never early, spot on time. My kids wanted to be there early. And it wasn't so because they were so spiritual, they wanted to hang out with their father, who's the minister. Their friends came early. They wanted to play. And they love to come to church because their friends are there. And so I've seen here in this church, you've got some energy givers. You've got people looking out for these kids and teasing them, giving them a little piece of candy here. Every church needs a couple candy mans, okay? So maybe God's calling you to be the church candy man. And I know you get in trouble with sugar and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't just any little piece of candy. Make that atmosphere for the kids. We have to provide that at the local New Testament church, that they look forward to it. So not only is it getting them out of Egypt, but it's getting them in a positive peer pressure place as much as they can. And I don't care how cool your program is, your program will not be effective until the kids get connected with each other. And I exhort our people all the time, when they have little friends in Sunday school and in junior church and a kids program, have them over on overnights. And have parties and have them over and spend the whole day and play together. Because kids that play together stay together, okay? And when they have a positive, to be cool at Newtown Church, you gotta obey your parents, man. And so you can teach, the world's telling them that disobedience is cool. The Bible teaches that obedience is cool. And they're going to conform, they're going to listen. You have a lot of influence on them when they're really little, but the older they get, the less influence you have and the more influence their peers have on them. Do everything you do diligence to have your kids and grandkids with a positive peer pressure. And the local church, that's a big deal. A lot of the churches I'm in are very small. They don't have big youth groups. Coordinate with other youth groups. Get 2 or 3 or 4 little youth groups together, have one big youth group and do events where they realize that, we're not the only people that love Jesus in the world. Number 1, God got them out of Egypt. Number 2, he got their attention. Have everybody take a bath and put on clean clothes and come out and stand by the mountain. And the mountain quaked and the mountain shook and fire came down and he got their attention. Parents, you need to get your children's attention. A lot of times we wait to a crisis moment. That's not the best time to get their attention. Best time to get their attention is have a special day, and we're just going to have a Jesus party day, and you make something fun out of it, and you sit down together and make it into a big deal, and you get their attention in a positive way. God got them out of Egypt, number 1. Number 2, he got their attention, kind of in awe. And then number 3, he gave the law. He clearly communicated the law in writing. And we need to communicate with our kids what the expectations are and why. Because we love you, and the consequences of disobedience. God gave the law, and he communicated to them clearly the consequences of violation and the blessing that would come by keeping the law. This ain't rocket science. So, you get them out of Egypt, think about that, out of the world. On the negative side, the positive side, into the local church and youth group, and get them connected with Christian kids from another church, whatever you can to fill that up with they're surrounded by friends whose parents are teaching their friends the same thing you're teaching. Get their attention. Do it in a positive way if you can. Sometimes it's crisis, you just got to go right now. Now's the time. And then clearly communicate what the standards are and what the consequences will be of disobedience. And you want to have rewards built in. I've heard that you should, for every criticism you give your children, you should give them 10 compliments. That's a good ratio. Whatever things are honest and pure and just, if there's any virtue, if there's any praise, think on these things. You see a child that's doing something positive, tell them they're awesome. I saw that, you're obedient. I saw you shared that. That's so awesome. I'm so proud of you. And you just find anything you can because they crave it. They crave it. I know I do. I'm an old man, but there's still a little boy that lives in my heart. He'll never grow up. And just laud them. You can't make it up. I don't think, oh, you're so beautiful. Hey, God made you beautiful. Okay, that's something God did. Thank you, Jesus, for making beautiful children. Thank you. But boy, behavior, positive behaviors, reinforce it, praise it, look for it. And sometimes if you spot misbehavior, the teaching points are all every day, all through the day. It's teaching points. You're at Walmart and you see kids acting up. And you might say, hey, you think Jesus is happy with that kid? Why not? And your kids will tell you why Jesus is not happy with that other kid. Just find teaching points anywhere you can. And they are there. You commit your way to the Lord. You ask him for wisdom. You commit your day to him. You go through the day. The kids are at your side. The grandkids are with you. Boom. I was with my grandkids. We went into Stewart's. That's an ice cream shop that we have. It's really good, fairly inexpensive, and really, really good for our chocolate malted milkshakes, which I brought my kids up on and bring my grandkids up on. We go inside, and my grandson, he was about 11. He very kindly opens the door for the lady, lets her come in front. And there's like four of us and just one lady. And so my grandkids and I, we were you can go ahead of us. We're going to take a little while. And she was so impressed with the kindness of my grandchildren and myself. We got 3 milkshakes and a cup of coffee. And I think the bill was like $12. We don't have to pay for it. The lady paid ahead. She paid for us. And she told the cashier to tell us she was so impressed with my children. She said that my children, they were my grandkids. And so my grandkids, it was just that moment. I mean, that's a God moment, don't you think? And I was able to use that, like, see what being courteous and respectful and kind. Yes, ma'am. They have a daddy that's from Alabama. They have southern manners in upstate New York. You don't find a lot of that up there. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. But people like it. Teaching moments are everywhere. Number 1, get them out of Egypt. Number 2, get them in a positive peer pressure group. Number 2, get their attention, hopefully in a positive time, in a positive way. Clearly communicate the standards. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. And get scripture verses in there. And then model this for them. And love your wives. And wives love your husbands. And love the kids. Part of love is discipline. And then the hard part comes now. God gives a warning. He sends a prophet. The law and the prophets give warnings. God doesn't just, oh, you did wrong. Boom, you're dead meat. You're a crispy critter. You disobeyed me. That's not how he rolls. God is long suffering. His heart breaks. We make Jesus sad all the time. He doesn't just zap us. He sends prophets, and they clearly warn. Now it's game on. Because when I drew a line, when a parent or a grandparent draws a line, number 1, the children don't believe you because they know you love them. They see kids getting away with stuff all the time, and they just are, so they'll listen to you, but you haven't really communicated yet. And they'll see that line, and they'll go right up to the line, right up to the edge of the line, and look at you. And then my second-born, strong-willed, she'll, you know what I'm saying? And then no consequence. And they disregard. And it can start out really young. Don't touch that. We didn't child-proof our house, or grandchildren-proof our house. We have poisons and stuff safe, okay? Guns are locked up, okay? But we don't child-proof our house. We house-proof our children. You don't touch that. So it starts out really little. And then as you establish things when they're really little, it just carries on as they get older. I was making sacrifice to have my children in Christian school, and I had a missionary that I greatly respect. He's been screaming fruitful. It's about my age. They had children about our age. They had the children in public school. Missionaries in Montreal, Canada. I was thinking, I'm a little bit more committed. I wouldn't put my kids in public school. And he said this, and I didn't buy into it, but boy, I do now. He said, I don't want my children making worldly decisions at age 16 or 17 in the backseat of a car. I want them to make worldly decisions in kindergarten. Little stuff that's easier to fix than an unwanted pregnancy. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I'm really, and some of you, you're midstream and you're just going to have to just try to just dig in and communicate and just love people through stuff. But a lot of the principles I'm saying, you have to get started almost from the beginning and establish a relationship, be as close to the kids as you can. And if you have a relationship with children when they're little, it just carries on. My children, a lot of times, my girls especially, I'd come home, I usually did visitation at night. I'd be home with my family from 3:30 to 6:30, then I would go out and do ministry in the evening, and a lot of times they'd be in bed by the time I come back. I'd see a note. I bet I got 50 of them over the years. Dad, wake us up early. We need to talk. They wanted to talk to me about junior high and high school issues. That's because they've always talked to me, and they always came to me with their issues, and I would go to them and ask them if they have any issues. Sometimes I'd go to them with my issues, just some way to communicate with them, to be close to them, to where when they had a problem, they didn't try to hide it from Dad. They wanted to bring it to Dad. Get them out of Egypt, get them in the house of God, get them positive peer pressure, communicate, get their attention, communicate with them completely. And then God sent the prophet to warn. You give one warning, and then you take action. You tell them what the consequence will be for the second violation, and then you don't lie to them. You keep your word. And if you don't, if you're a liar, what are they to believe? Now it's a guessing game for them. Well, I might get away with it. Let's go for it. But if they know, absolutely know, they're not going to get away with it, and they know what the consequences is, and you keep your word, and they have to suffer that consequence, then you're on. And some kids will just get it quickly. 2 of my 3 did it, and 1 didn't. But that's how God dealt with his children. And it's the model for us. And there's a lot of little tools we're going to talk about, kind of not the rest of the hour. That's how God did it. And I think it's clear. He kept his word. That's the hardest part. Consistency. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. To be consistent in our discipline is critical. If we're not consistent, that means we're lying to them. And when we're lying to them, what are they to believe? And so it's so important. Any of you watch Dog Whisperer on TV? There's not a lot of difference between training dogs and training kids. I'm telling you, there's some principles. We had 3 dogs. We had 2, and we got a new one. And we just had the dumbest dogs in the whole world. I'm telling you, these dogs were so dumb. And then I got a little video from the library called Good Puppy, and I watched the video, and it turns out my dogs weren't dumb. I was dumb, and I learned how to train dogs. It's so easy. And not every dog's as easy as others, but it's really not hard. You have to get them under control first, to sit and to stay. And you reward them, and just like a child, you keep your word. And that puppy so much wants to please you. He'll stay. You can't wait to come and get petted. I'll stay, because when they say come, I'll get petted. Oh, I love these people. I love my people so much. And they want to make you happy. And once you've taught a dog to stay, and you walk away, And they're like, they want so bad to come. And you stay. Once you get that down, everything else starts falling into place. It took me about 3 days to get through to our dog to stay. And then you reward them. And then the next day we taught to sit, lay down. And all my family knows sign language, except for me. I know my name. So I would teach the dogs commandments, voice command. And then my daughters the same day would teach the dog sign commands. Stay, come. I think it was sit, different signs. And the dog would respond to all of us. Dog Whisperer uses the word pack leader. You know, I see people with their dogs and they're not under control. And I say, well, who's the leader here? Who's the master here? And dogs are pack animals, and you can become the pack leader. And I learned that when I go to somebody's house and they have dogs under control, I can get their dogs pretty much under control, at least leaving me alone, because I know how to do it. And I never have to hit the dog or anything like that. There's just ways that you become the pack leader. The dog doesn't mess with you. And because once you start petting a dog, it's just like he's all over you. You know, you have to just kind of take charge, become the pack leader. And then when you pet the dog, and then he thinks, oh, he's so happy now, the pack leaders. And so a lot of that is true with children. You're the authority. I see today, I have one of my 3 children that really don't parent as well as the other 2. They bribe all the time, and they do, not games, they do bartering, and well, we'll do this if you do that, you won't get. And I think it's okay. You have to eat your broccoli before you get your dessert and all that kind of stuff. That's been around forever. That works. There should be a reward for obedience, a reward for compliance. But be honest when you set that reward. And once you've established that you're the parent and their calling is to be obedient, and that there'll be an awakening that children have, that you love them and that you're not just trying to wreck their lives. I told a story to the kids last night about why does mom and dad have all these rules? Because we love you, we don't want anything bad to happen to you. And so I remember when my son was about 12, maybe 13, he got it. Now, he was always compliant, but there was a breakthrough. There was one of those moments in time. He came to me and he said, Dad, I want to have an allowance like all the other kids do. I said, okay, figure out how much you want and what you'll be willing to do to make that kind of money. So he started charting it out, and he told me he wanted, I don't know, it was maybe $12 or something. And I said, I can go higher than that, but you're going to have to work for it. I have to work for my money, you have to work for yours. And so he's trying to figure it all out. And I said, before you do any more figuring, let me just make a proposal to you. When you watch me around the house, what do I do? Well, I said, in general, I do everything that needs to be done. Yeah. What does mom do around the house? Well, but in general, she does everything that needs to be done. I said, you could be a kid and an allowance and earn up to this much. I said, but here's a proposal. How about you just do like I do, like mom does? Why don't you just do whatever needs to be done? Anything she tells you to do. Anything I tell you to do. Just do it. That's what being mature is all about. And I said, and you just do whatever needs to be done. And then at times when the youth group goes over to Friendly's restaurant after church, which they did a lot, I'll just throw you $10. You can, any church event, it's covered. I'll take you just do anything that needs to be done. You're part of the family. Just you do what I do, whatever needs to be done, like mom does, whatever needs to be done. You just do whatever we ask you to do. And then when that stuff comes up, it's legit. I'm not going to go out and buy him a car. But when the youth group's gone out, I'll throw him $10. And I said, so you choose to make out your list and how much you want to earn. He just took the list. He already, by half done, he just ripped it up. He said, this is stupid. He goes, I know your heart. You love me, man. He said, I'll get way more out of you by just doing what needs to be done. And it was game on. You see, that he communicated to me that day. He knows my heart. He knows I love him. And we had a little bit extra money by this time. When the girls were younger, we didn't have as good a cash flow as we did. You see, we had communicated to him. And he says, I don't have to worry about anything. I just do what needs to be done, and all my needs to be met. I need a new ball glove. It's there. I don't have to save for it. And you know, he never pushed the envelope on that either. Isn't that cool? He never asked us for something unreasonable. And I realized I got a good young man here. I got a young man that's getting it. We communicated to him. He's part of the family. And he never broke our trust. I have here just some principles. You must be the boss. I had a 98-pound grandmother that could very quickly become the boss. You're at the store and you're acting up. She just put her little hand right here on your shoulder. You know that little spot right there? She just put her little hand on little Dookie's shoulder and just squeeze that nerve. You know what I'm saying? Little Dookie is completely under control now. She'd probably go to prison for that today, but she was an awesome woman. And she only had to do that like once. But she knew where the spot was, and she'd only do it if it was necessary. If it was necessary, she would do it. And so you could take your kids out anywhere. I know people that can't take their kids out somewhere because they can't behave. We took our kids everywhere. Had experience. We were at a restaurant, and, I don't know, Sunday, whatever, after church. We were all there, and kids were well behaved. And an older lady came up to me and commended us. Like, I've been watching your family. Your children are beautiful. I saw you say a little prayer. And she goes, this is so refreshing for me to see this. And I said, well, I'm a young man, but I'm from the old school. She said, what's your secret? She said, what's your secret of raising these kids so beautifully? I said, well, I'm a young man, but I'm from the old school. Spare the rod, spoil the child. She went, what? She totally freaked out on us. I thought she was going to call the cops. You paddle your kids? That's a touchy subject in New York. I just read it in the Bible, and I just do it. But I had a pastor friend in New York that paddled his kids. The kids got angry, went to school, reported children, was it? Yeah, they came and took the children out of his home. It was a mess for about 2 years to straighten that thing out. So I don't know how it is in Ohio, but that's a touchy subject. You have to figure that one on your own, but never discipline a child in anger. Never, ever in anger. Send them to their room, go out and sing Victory in Jesus to meet it, come back, and then carry out whatever is on your heart, whatever you told them the consequence will be for such and such, and do it. We had a board of education for the seat of understanding, a little paddle up above the thing. I just look up above the refrigerators where it was at. I just look up there, and that's usually all it took. You know, a lot of older people, remember your parents just had that look? Just that look. And when the kids see that look, they know better. And it was kind of funny. The kids would be kind of getting on the edge of things, and I just kind of just stop and go, okay, Dad, you don't need that. We're okay. We're good. We're good. You see, we were the boss. And they knew what would happen. We didn't lie to them. And 2 of the 3 were getting it all along the way. You got to be the boss. Parents, be one. Your kids are going to try to divide you. I was a soft touch in my house. The kids would come to me. I'm at church, and I'm done preaching. 25 people are standing in line. You know, people are dying, and people want to get married, and they're like, Dad, can we go to McDonald's after church? I'm like, yeah, we can go to McDonald's. I didn't even. Boy, they're going to hold me to my word. Dad said we're going to McDonald's, and Mom's got dinner ready after church at home. So they go, yeah, we're going to McDonald's. Mom's like, what are you talking about? So now they got me and Mom divided. They are very wise at this. And so now my wife's mad at me, and I just tried to minister. So I learned, cut them off at the pass. When they would ask me anything, I would say, talk to your mother about it. I didn't make any decisions. And then whenever she made a decision, I always 100% kept it. They'd always come to me first because I always would say yes, and she would be the one to say no. So I learned my lesson on that one. And I would ask, have you asked Mom about it yet? Their heads would drop. So don't let them divide you. Be one. I mentioned this before. Keep your promises, whether it's for rewards, for obedience and responsibility, or punishments. Don't lie to them. I mentioned before, different punishments are needed for each child. Taking the phone privileges away from my second-born just about killed her. Now, I never beat her, but she could take a beating, you know. I mean, she just didn't fear the paddle. It wasn't effective. Oh, it's going to hurt, but it's only going to hurt for a little while. I'll be fine, and I'll just go ahead and have fun doing what I want to do. But boy, taking the phone away from her, oh my goodness, man, it just like ripped her guts out. So you have to be clever. You have to have God give you wisdom and figure it out, whatever it is that works. Part of parenting is teaching the children steps towards responsibility, little chores around the house, even when they're little, help them take care of a pet, cleaning up their own room. My wife had the kids all doing their own laundry, stripping their beds to put the new sheets down, and she would just put them out. And my kids were very self-sufficient, and they didn't even think about it because they're part of the family, and everybody does what just needs to be done. And she would hold them accountable to that, and if they didn't do it, they heard about it. And my wife was not the one to carry out discipline. I was always a disciplinarian. That's the way it worked best for us. I say in blended families, it's best for the biological parent to carry out. That's not a rule book from the Bible, but I found that really works a lot better for the biological parent to be the disciplinarian on that thing. But you want to develop steps of responsibility. Well, you're big now. I think you're big enough to feed the cat all by yourself and clean out the litter box. And then you pump them up about that, and they're responsible. Now you're going to get bigger, and you're going to have more things to do because you're so awesome, and I can trust you. And you work that, and you build that in. It's just common sense, isn't it? And yet I see kids that do nothing except play on their games and their little screen time. And just to take that screen time away from them, they just go absolutely berserk. We could do a whole hour on screen time. I'm just here, just kind of flash a warning. Keep a handle on it. They get addicted to that screen so fast. Absolutely be careful with that. We have it now when the grandkids come to our house, screens go up. We might give them, if they're going to be there all day, we'll give them a half hour here or a half hour there. We just don't let that. That's not healthy. And like I said, we could do a whole hour of that. I talk about, I mentioned it already, I just bounced around just to make sure I hit these points. You want a pound of positive praise for every ounce of criticism and instruction. And they get addicted to that. And then if they're not getting that praise and reinforcement, they can change their behavior and get it. I like to use crises as opportunities. I'm going to give you a big dramatic one in the next session. We're almost done with this session here. We'll just take a little bit of a break, come back, see a video from my daughter, and then we'll hit the strong-willed children thing where I really took a crisis and turned that into opportunity. Let me give you the pattern for that. I don't believe anything Rahm Emanuel believes, but he said you don't want to let a crisis go to waste. I think there's some wisdom to that. He's talking about a political way. I'm talking about in a family way. Crisis comes up, best thing to do when you're really emotional is just time out for dad and mom to regather. Go to your room. We'll figure it out. They go to their room. And I'm out there in the kitchen trying to figure it out. Oh, Lord, help me. And he will. And I get my emotions under control. We figure it out. And so we're not just at each other's face. We go in and we sit down and say, let's have a cup of tea together. Cup of tea? Okay. And then we start to chit-chat. Say things like, Satan's trying to destroy our family. He's trying to destroy our relationship. Before we try to figure this out, I just want you to know He loves you so much, Mama. We've never been parents before. This is our first run, and we don't have it all figured out. And so you're in here trying to figure it out, get your own way, or we're on there we want to honor God. God's the big boss here, not me, not Mom. We start talking to them. And I think it's really good to always try to talk to a child. I say, I know you're only 10, but I'm going to talk to you like you're 16 because I'm not smart enough to bring it down to a 10-year-old level. So I think you're smart enough to come up to a 16-year-old level and then try to get it in about 14, and they'll step up. They love to be treated as though they were a little bit older than what they are. I've never had that fail working with problems with kids and families in church. I'm working with other families with their children problems all the time as well. I say, that's a phrase they just love. I know you're only 12, but I'm going to kind of deal with you like you're 16. Okay. They'll step up to that. And when you're in the crisis, don't just pit your will up against their will. Get smarter than that. Now, sometimes that'll happen, but avoid that. I'm going to give you a real dramatic one in a moment. So it's a really cute story, the happy ending. But it got really scary. There was a conflict with my daughter. She's about 13. And Rachel, when she was 13, looked like she was about 17. And she was pretty big, and she was like a young woman. And boy, that was scary because she was gorgeous, and the guys were crazy over her. And man, I bought a couple extra shotguns during that era of our lives. And never had to use them, but for shooting young men, but I did shoot some groundhogs and things. But she brought her mother to tears, just going at it with Mom, and I went in and she got in my face, and that didn't last very long. And the bed was there, and I shoved her hard. The bed was there. She just fell in the bed. It was totally nothing happened. It was no injury. But if it would have been a cliff, I think I was so angry, I was out of control, and I could have hurt her. I was completely out of control in the moment. Boy, as soon as I did that, the Holy Spirit just convicted me. Whoosh, get out. I said, I'll be back in when I get under control. I said, what I just did to you was wrong. And I said, I came this close to really hurting you, and that is so wrong. But you think about what you're doing too, and I'm just going to go talk with God and let him beat me up, and then we'll come in and talk with you. And you have a talk with God too. And I went out, and you're staying in your room, and I went in later that night about, I don't know, it was probably a couple hours later. We sat down. I said, let's pray. And I humbled myself before her. And I let her hear me confess my sin to God. God gives grace to the humble. I said, so I've gotten right with God. I said, now I want to get right with you. And she started crying, and she forgave me in 1 second. I said, okay, now you've forgiven me for what I did wrong. Now let's talk about what you did. And man, she was just broken. And she knew everything that she did wrong. And I said, let's write it down. And she wasn't shying away. She broke. I lied to my mom, and I did this. I covered up, and I got mad at you, and I talked back, and I know better. And then I yelled at you, and I never yelled at you before, and I was so mad, and I was out of control too. And so we just connected all the way, and we hugged, and we wept, and God turned a crisis into something beautiful. 4 to 5 minute break, come back for a 12-minute video. I'll have you out here about 7:35. Is that a deal? See you in a few minutes.